about the kingdom of God, and he healed those who needed to be cured. As the day was drawing to a close, the 12 approached him and said, "Dismiss the crowd so that they can go to the surrounding villages and farms and find lodging and provisions, for we are in a deserted place here." And he said to them, "Give them some food yourselves." And they replied, 5 loaves and 2 fish are all we have, unless we ourselves go and buy food for all these people. Now the men there numbered about 5,000. Then he said to his disciples, "Have them sit down in groups of about 50. They did so and made them all sit down. Then taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing over them, broke them, and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. They all ate and were satisfied, and when the leftover fragments were picked up, they filled 12 wicker baskets. So a very familiar gospel, I think, to everyone as they hear it at Mass. Lots of good, rich things to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Coming on the feast day of Corpus Christi, what we call Corpus Christi Sunday, a reminder that in the Eucharist, Christ continues to be with us in his sacramental self, his physical self, body, blood, soul, and divinity is the term that we use in the Catechism. But it harkens back to this moment during the preaching mission when they found themselves needing to be good hosts to a lot of people out in a very deserted kind of place. And it's kind of comical always that the 12 approach him and say, "Now, Jesus, we don't mean to tell you your business, but, there's a lot of people here and there's nowhere to get food, and so maybe you ought to get," as if Jesus doesn't know, doesn't see what's going on around him. They, of course, as we would be, as we often are even in our own lives, they are impressed by how little they have,
mm-hmm.
and allow that to drive their assumption about what can be done.
It's interesting to just reading through these with you is always such a blessing, such a grace in my life. But just, I was just wondering, just when you enter back into the scene, like what I would have thought actually sitting there. There's this guy who's gone viral a bunch of times named Oz the Mentalist, and he like predicts people's ATM numbers and stuff like that. I think he was on America's Got Talent and, one of these. Anyways, and so I just think if I was sitting back then, would I just think that Jesus was some sort of magician, that this was some sort of magic, this was some sort of manipulation? The disciples really have, they're hiding the bread under the under the rocks or behind the trees, or what I'm saying? It's just interesting to think about what the response of the crowd would have been and what people were thinking, or were people just thinking, "I actually really need some food and I don't care how I get it, I'm just starving." Because some people, and what they would have been fixated on, as I try to fixate on the deeper message of this passage, I was kind of pausing as you were reading and thinking about that, just how in some ways we get distracted by, some of these things without thinking about the deeper side of it.
Yeah, it doesn't talk about how many empty baskets were roaming around in the crowd. It tells us later that 12 wicker baskets. I mean, I'm sure the 12 is symbolic. But yes, I think that's exactly right, that even people who hope that Jesus is something spiritually real,
absolutely,
may yet have wondered, well, is that real?
This is kind of funny. It's kind of funny. Like, how is he doing this? How is he doing this? How does he make
what
this happen?
follows, the other side of that is when they are fed and Jesus recognizes which is why he was so loath to do such kinds of miracles. Then they chase him around the lake because they recognize, hey, he can feed us anytime. And so,
right.
So he doesn't want them to get fixated on that. What he wants to give us is his very self, and he needs us to trust him, both so that he can give us himself. You know, we at confirmation mass last night, we had the passage from Acts, in which it tells us that no one can say Jesus is Lord except in the Holy Spirit. Jesus can't give us himself unless we have faith. We can see the Eucharist. We can watch the priest consecrate the bread and wine at Mass. But without faith, we won't believe that that's Jesus there before us now. And then in terms of us going out, we're sent out at the end of Mass. If we look at our 2 fish and 5 loaves, as they did, and say, well, I don't have enough to do any good, as opposed to saying, Lord, I know you can do whatever you want with me. Just help me to just open myself and let you work through me. And then we see what comes. You know, Jesus is the one who's responsible for bringing the bread and the fish. For everybody, we just have to give him what we have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I find myself ignoring what the Lord is saying to me, or sort of making substitutions where he is, you know, I'm responding with 5 loaves and 2 fish is all I have is this. I don't have what's needed, but he's saying, you know, almost just saying, no, just go, you know, just go. I'm going to take care of you. And so often I'm saying, well, with what? What am I going to, I don't know how to do this the best, or I don't know how to be the best father or best friend, or I don't know what the right words are. Oftentimes, you know, we don't know what the right thing to say is to someone in need, or we don't know the right, you know, posture to have. And sometimes we just need to listen to people. Sometimes we just need to be there and trust that we're there for someone. So, you know,
I'm just thinking of a practical example in the life of family. These days, you know, kids have so many scheduled activities and team activities. And so tremendous pressure on parents to give up Sunday Mass because the team is playing and we got to be there. And so the big thing, the crowd, so to speak, is, you know, how do we help our children grow, socialize, have fun with their friends, all of that. The 5 loaves and 2 fish is Sunday Mass. Mm-hmm. You know, so as a parent, you can say, Jesus, I don't know how to do this big thing to make my children happy with their friends and learning how to play sports and all the good that comes from that and all those things. But I'm going to give you the 5 loaves and 2 fish that I have. We're going to see to it that they're at Mass. We're going to share our faith with them as we take them to Mass. And then the rest of it, I'm going to trust that you're going to help us find answers to that. Mm-hmm. That's sort of an example of how this kind of unfolds in practical daily life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful. Yeah, there's been a lot going on in the diocese, something that just kind of...
and connected to the Eucharist.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've had the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage is concluding its journey across the nation and came through Tulsa here in the last couple of weeks. We also had the Vocations kickball game, which was a great community event, which was started last year. Father's We started that as sort of a new fun community event. And within the first year, you know, there was hundreds of people there. This year, I think that they were saying that there was 500 or so individuals just there to watch the priests and the seminarians play kickball. Luckily, the weather held out. I feel like this spring specifically, it's like April showers bring May showers, and then May showers bring June showers. And that's just the way it feels. So it was great that we had good weather for that. But the Eucharistic the Eucharistic pilgrimage ended up having pretty good weather for that as well. And talk about another event that takes a lot of trust. I think some of us who are kind of questioning, maybe there was people out there who, you know, maybe are kind of like, thinking to themselves, maybe I'll go. I don't know that I want to go. I know that there's people who are going to ask me questions about what this is or what I believe. What did you learn kind of from the event, Bishop, and from your perspective in being there for that?
Yeah, when we had before the Eucharistic Congress, there was a Eucharistic procession that started at 4 places in the country and converged on Indianapolis. So there were 4 legs of a cross-country Eucharistic pilgrimage.
Yep.
And then after the Eucharistic Congress, the idea is to take that experience and to take that exhilaration of faith back to the parishes and back out into the country. So it's like our Mass. We come together for Mass, we're fed, then we're sent out. So the Congress does it in a big way. And so as a part of that going back out is this final pilgrimage across the country. This time it started from Indianapolis and is moving across to California. And they called our leg of it, the leg that goes through Oklahoma, I think that was called the Drexel.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
St. Catherine Drexel leg. So it began in our diocese on the edge in Miami. So if you've never been to Miami, you ought to go to Mass at Sacred Heart in Miami sometime. Miami's out there in the far northern tip of our diocese. That's where we met the large van of pilgrims, these sort of permanent pilgrims for the pilgrimage. They came by van from their last stop in Kansas. I forget where it was. In Kansas they were. And it began in Oklahoma in Miami. We celebrated Mass in Miami. So the van is cool because it's got maybe 10 or 12 people riding in it cross country. And they have taken a cabinet, it's sort of like a cabinet, and bolted it to the floor right behind the 2 front seats and in that space before the bench seat of the van. And that's the tabernacle in this van. And that cabinet has on the top of it, it's designed in such a way that you can put a monstrance on the top, but there's little latches that keep the monstrance in place because it's in a van.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Riding around. And so they carry the Eucharist in the Luna in the tabernacle. But then when they arrive at a place, they take it out of the tabernacle and put it in the monstrance and then bring it into the place.
Amazing.
So we celebrated Mass at Miami and then put everybody back in the van and in our cars. And we came to Tulsa. We started at the Reynolds Center, so we had this big arena. Hundreds of people were there, especially outside. The dance troops were setting up. We had about 6 of our Aztec dance troops setting up. And we had a short period of adoration and prayer inside the Reynolds Center. So always cool when you can convert a secular venue, hotel room or, conference room or arena, stadium, etc. So we used the Reynolds Center into a sacred space. So we started there. Then we started our march from there. Eucharist in the monstrance, all the hundreds of people crossed the campus. And then 4.2 miles later, we go through Christ the King, stop by Christ the King Parish. We had 3 stations along the way. Christ the King was the second one. We stopped there for benediction and for prayer, and then moving on to the cathedral. What was new, though, because, we do this every year on Corpus Christi.
Right.
We have this big procession. This year, what was new is that in a sign of potency of this kind of devotional practice. There is some kind of a fundamentalist sect in apparently East Texas that had learned about the Eucharistic pilgrimage, the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, and they are convinced that Catholics are wrong about the Eucharist, that Catholics commit idolatry in the way they believe in and treat the Eucharist, that they're wrong about Mary, that the church is the whore of Babylon, all the kinds of things that such a fundamentalist sect might believe about the church. So they're incensed about the whole thing, and they're accompanying the Eucharistic pilgrimage at every stop with a small group of people who you might think of, they might think of them as people out there to try to save Catholics from going to hell for being Catholics. But they walked alongside of us throughout this whole procession with bullhorns, trying to convince the Catholics in the procession about all these things, that they're wrong and they're going to hell and all the things. And so, as I say, a sign of potency, well, when you get that kind of a reaction, when you stir the devil's, pride up, so much so that you see it come out in some form or fashion, some kind of attack, then you know that something is going right there. We don't normally see that in our Eucharistic processions in town because there's a good ecumenical spirit among people and among the Christians in Tulsa, so that even if there are people in Tulsa who believe the same things, who also think that Catholics commit idolatry and paganism and so forth, they don't come out and accompany us in our pilgrimages and yell at us with bullhorns and things like that. But this group did and does, and so the irony of the whole thing is that they're making the Eucharistic pilgrimage themselves, even though they're totally against the Eucharist. They're making the Eucharistic pilgrimage themselves as they go to every stop along the way and accompany this thing.
Bishop, what's your advice to those of us? I know the place that I've seen it before is when we had the Garden of Hope. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, you'd have a group of Catholics out there for 40 Days for Life. I know I didn't always go out there like on a weekly basis or anything, but I'd go out there from time to time, and occasionally I'd see a group. The Catholics would be sort of, and I hate to just generalize, all the Catholics are being good and anybody else who's not being Catholics, that's not what I want to say here. Mm-hmm. But occasionally you'd be out there praying the rosary with a group, and then somebody gets over on the frontage and starts shouting at young women going into the clinic, and it kind of mirrors this situation in some way, kind of. It's kind of similar. What's sort of your advice when we're sort of faced with that level of confrontation? And sometimes the confrontation we face occasionally, if you're putting yourself out there as a Catholic at an airport or on a bus or when you're traveling, it's usually sort of more passive aggressive. If you have some confrontation, it's not quite this in your face. But what's your advice in sort of how do you respond when that's happened? Because I'm assuming for you're as I heard this week, once you're the guy with the pointy hat and the crucifix around his neck, and so you're sort of a lightning rod or someone that would say, oh, this is the guy I need to come after. So what's your advice when we're in those contexts?
Yeah, and the people in the procession had to deal with that themselves too, because we do this each year, but we don't have this kind of in-your-face antagonism. Yeah. And so when it happens, it wants to get at you. It wants to get a rise from you. It wants to cause you to be defensive and even aggressive. But we are loving to our neighbor, not because of how they are, but because of who we are. And, when we don't decide whether to get in someone's face in response based on whether they're getting in our face first or not, we decide that based on we are Catholic Christians, and so we're supposed to love our neighbor even when our neighbor is persecuting us. at one point, this one or a couple of members of this group, they had been accompanying us on the opposite sidewalk. We had a permit for the lane of the road that we were in that allowed us to use that lane of the road. They didn't have such a permit. So when they tried to come into the lane with us, that was the only time where we really physically enforced that, no, you cannot be in the lane here with us.
Wow.
Beyond that, there was no need, and it would have been wrong for us to, try to get someone to walk along beside them and yell back at them and so forth.
Yeah.
That would have undone everything we were trying to do.
That's right.
But it allowed people, as they're walking along, listening to that, to wrestle with, to have the experience of being persecuted for their beliefs in public, and to wrestle with that, and to wrestle with the feelings that it causes inside of a person. So I think, respond with love as best you can. The only time you would do something more is if the situation called for it, meaning they were endangering someone or they were trying to, attack the Eucharist physically or something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely challenging, but a lot to chew on, a lot to learn from that experience, a lot to think about.
Well, the other point I was making to people in that day and the days after is that what we were not experiencing was an experience of ecumenical dialogue and difference. Certainly within Tulsa and within the church broadly, there is interest in interfaith dialogue where the church is trying to have respectful conversations with people who are not Christian so that we can deepen each other's understanding of what we believe. And then there is also ecumenical dialogue where the church is entering dialogue with Christians, other Christians who are not Catholic, so that we can deepen each other's understanding of what we believe. And in such dialogues, you come head to head with things that are very sharp about differences in belief. And that's fine. There's not a problem with that. But the difference between that and this, what we experienced, which we would use the term proselytizing, is the attitude of respect for the dignity of another person and respect for a person's conscience. These people were using any means that they could think of, including violent rhetoric, to try to coerce Catholics into rejecting their faith, as opposed to trying to have a respectful dialogue with people with whom they disagreed. You can't typically have a respectful dialogue through a bullhorn with somebody.
Right, especially this close together too, oftentimes.
So time and place, circumstances matter. And so it was important to me that people because when people hear about ecumenical dialogue or interfaith dialogue, they should understand that as a very positive thing, something that they would even be open to entering into, as opposed to this, which was just a slugfest. They're trying to just slug their way into somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think trusting that the Lord is sort of working through this. What is your hope when we do these processions and when you sort of pray through these processions and your posture? When I've seen you at these processions, I notice you have a posture of prayer when you're in these processions. So I've noticed that, and many do. But what is sort of your hope? Some folks out there might say, it just seems like a big parade or a little bit of a show, or maybe there's a false sense of, that you're just showing off, or you're just kind of doing this to, what would you say to that? And sort of, can you speak to sort of your posture and sort of your hopes for actually maybe practically what are we trying to accomplish here,
Yeah, one of the important pieces of an activity like this is to have someone who can walk alongside of it, who is trained a little bit in the art of dialogue, and who might even have some materials, pamphlets or something. And what they're looking for is the opportunity to engage people who see it and who stop, because that's what happens. It's a public display of a deeply held Catholic belief. And for many people, they will never have seen such a thing. And they will never have seen the Eucharist in a monstrance and all of the signs and gestures of reverence that surround that. And so when they see it, they will be amazed by it just in the ordinary human way. Wow, look at all of that color and noise and obvious faith, but what does it all mean? So they'll be standing looking at it, wondering, and then to have people who can go along and engage with them. Hey, yeah, I wonder if you have any questions about that. I can talk to you a little bit about it if you like. Yeah, tell me what this is. What's going on there?
Yeah.
An opportunity to engage people and to share with them what we believe and what we're doing. That, as all statements of truth have, that witness can cause questions in another person. Well, I don't believe that. Should I believe that? Why don't I believe that? Why do they believe that? And so forth. All of which is the point. All of that and everything else is the point. To sort of plow the ground with something like this so that the Holy Spirit has an opportunity to engage with people. Many people who enter the church each year, who come into full communion with the church or who are converts to Catholicism, either of those two groups, many of them have made their way to full communion because of the Eucharist. And, you know, we would hope as we do something like this that there would be people who God would be striving to lead into fullness of communion with the church, for whom this would become the catalyst. At the same time, it deepens our own faith. It allows us to take into the public society what we ourselves believe, this central mystery. Because otherwise, you know, I mean, we do this in our churches, of course, yes, but you can't see into our churches. People aren't coming to look into our churches.
Right. Yeah, and overall, churches are sort of private spaces, or would be, you know, I don't hop around to other Protestant churches just to see what's going on very often, and things like that. Yeah, I heard Bishop Cousins say, this is about a year and a half ago, but I heard him when he was talking about the National Eucharistic Congress, I heard him say that there was sort of a hope for this sort of Guadalupe effect. It was the term he used, referencing Our Lady of Guadalupe and coming and sort of this moment, this big moment. So this procession essentially is a moment that we're creating that will hopefully create conversion, could create some movement, some thought like you're talking about that would ultimately create some conversion or activity. Have you heard of any fruit or any good stories from events like this or from the pilgrimages or the processions that we've done in the past?
Yeah, no, I think that some of it you can see on the faces of people watching, because they're obviously wondering what in the world, but they look pleased, or at least delighted. You know, wow, what is that? It's the same kind of joy they might have at seeing a parade go by, because it is like a parade. But
yeah,
you know, just in the human level, it leaves them with questions, you know, as they go apart. And then, you know, for the people who are accompanying the Eucharist in the procession, you hear all the time how meaningful to them it is, how it helps to deepen their own faith in the Eucharist. Part of what Bishop Cousins is getting at is that as we deepen our faith in the Eucharist, our own faith in the Eucharist, it helps us to be better disciples who are willing to witness to Jesus Christ in the world broadly, not just in the Eucharist, but broadly, and that's part of that Guadalupe effect, is to become those people who help Jesus to find others.
it would seem to me that the communities that I've been most moved by, inspired by, are those who spend the most time in prayer with our Lord and be built up in His love and build their identity in Him. And those communities tend to be wonderful places where people are truly worshiping. It's not necessarily because of the music or because of the whatever else is going on, but it has to do with the level of worship that the people in the pews actually do when they are at the Mass or when they are in adoration. Are they spending that time and that grace?
Yeah.
Sort of permeates in those communities.
I think the more a person is in touch with the level of the mystery, the depth of the mystery of our faith, and is engaging in the faith because of this relationship with Jesus in this mystery, the less they're bothered by things that change on the outsides. In both in their life generally, but also in the life of the church. And so in the parish, they're much more likely to be committed to the parish and to getting involved with the parish and to being leaders, yes, trying to lead and guide the strategies and the strategic plans and all the things that parishes do, but at the same time not seeking to control it all, and being able to cooperate with whatever we all decide that we're going to be doing. Okay, yes, let's all get behind that and go.
One amazing event that's also coming up, which we were, unfortunately, we didn't have last year, which is an ordination. And I know that Deacon Robert Williams will be ordained a priest on June 27th, which is very exciting for the diocese. And is that a public event? Can anybody go to that, Bishop? Or
always in any of the ordinations, a person can go. Robert Williams' mom, as I understand it, is making his vestment that he's going to wear at his first Mass, which is very special.
That is cool.
We ordained. Adrian Meneses. Wow, I was suddenly thinking, did we do that already? Yes, we did already.
Yes, we did. Yeah,
and I did it, and I'm thinking, and just a week ago, right? Like, did I do that? I couldn't remember suddenly.
It's funny.
Yes, we ordained a transitional deacon and a permanent deacon this year. It just so happened that one of our permanent deacons, for various reasons, was not ordained with his class. So we ordained him and a transitional deacon. So we would look forward to a priestly ordination next year. Actually, because of the new way that seminary works, Adrian would be ordained a priest in December. And so we have Robert this summer. Robert, because he's studying at the North American College in Rome, the Roman educational system is somewhat different. And part of that difference is that the men, after they're finished with their theology, their basic degree in theology, are coming home to be ordained as priests, but then they go back for a year, some of them 2 years, to finish their final paper and classes. And so he'll go back in September or so. So that's coming up. And then also we were seeing on social media and otherwise that Holy Family, the Cathedral, has purchased First Church of Christ Scientist.
Yeah, what are we doing there?
And so it was the kind of thing where we were imagining that this is going to take a lot of communication effort for people to not get confused, because we had tried to purchase First Christian Church downtown. And this one that we did purchase is called First Church of Christ Scientist. So they sound so very similar, and they're across the street from each other. And they both have domes. And so this is the domed church with columns on the front. It's a round domed church. The other one's kind of a square domed church.
Sort of that concrete or white.
Yeah, it has a stone-looking exterior.
Yeah.
Across the street from First Christian, and just half a block down the street from the cathedral,
And on the same side of Boulder as the cathedral.
On the same side as the cathedral. And so when we tried to purchase First Christian, the reason we were trying to purchase it is because the cathedral is growing, the school is growing, there's need for more space, and something, next to it downtown. And First Christian was a big space that came open, but it turned out to be simply too expensive. It's a very older building and a very large building. And so we weren't able to move forward with that, but this building came open. It's a smaller building, but still gives us a lot of land around it in terms of parking and in terms of green space for the school, for the playgrounds and the like. So the idea there is now we've purchased it, now we'll be striving to raise money to pay for the building itself, which was a very reasonable purchase price. But then the cathedral parish will go into a strategic planning at the level of the parish to determine what are our needs, parish and school, what are our needs. Now that we have this building and the 1-point-something acres of land that are with it, what's the highest and best use for us of this new property? And then once that's determined, then presumably there would be a campaign in the future to raise the money to do the renovations and whatever all it would take.
Absolutely.
So it's very exciting for us to have been able to do it because, of course, land is hard to come by in the downtown. And to have been able to do this so close to the cathedral, prayers now will go up. We'll ask St. Joseph to intercede for us, that we're able to also purchase the property that's now between the cathedral and this new property, which is being used as a small employment agency business now. But that would be, of course, the ideal, to be able to have a contiguous property along that side of the street that is all part of the cathedral and school.
Absolutely.
So we'll see.
Yeah, exciting stuff. And then other transitions. I have a personal transition that many out there are aware of as we've put out announcements and things like that. But my wife and I and our 5 and soon to be 6 children will be moving across the state. But so very bittersweet for us. So we'll be moving on, but we have loved living in this diocese. We recently had a staff luncheon where I was able just to share that, we've lived 8.5 years of our life here in Tulsa, and we have truly loved this diocese. And, to have an amazing diocese, it takes a lot of people. It's not just because you have a great bishop. No offense, you're not that great. No, but it's not just because you have a great priest or a great bishop, but it takes a lot of people. And it takes a lot of people who are committed in their prayer life, who are committed to serve, who are committed to their own personal apostolate in their own, hopefully in their own home and then in their own community and moving outward from there. And so that's evident in our diocese. And I think that's what makes our diocese so homey and yet so vibrant, such a small place. I remember when, Bishop, when you arrived at Tulsa and just you commenting on the scope of parishes coming from a diocese in Texas with parishes with 4,000 families or 5,000 families, in some cases, in some of your largest communities. And you having heard of some of our bigger communities in Tulsa and coming and realizing, wait, I've heard of these communities and how vibrant they are. I would have thought that they had even more people because they are so vibrant and so well known. And so anyway, so very excited, but very honored to have had the opportunity to steward our donors in this diocese and be involved in so many amazing projects. And just a lot of great memories and a lot of great relationships that we've established here.
Yeah, I think there's a sense in which you were more immediately at home just because you and Whitney both have connections in Kansas.
Yeah.
And so, this living in this part of the country, this was not that far from your home. Actually, you were coming from a much further away in Chicago.
That's right.
And so, now you'll be able to continue, still close to your home where you grew up and so forth, and also close to us. Our paths will cross. It's one of the nice things about where you're going.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing, folks at different things. And so over the next, when this episode airs, our family will still be around for a couple weeks. And so just, send us a note or whatnot, or if you want to stay in touch, send me your contact and put you on an email list for a solicitation. No, I'm just kidding. But, but to stay in touch genuinely. And so if you're hearing this out there, but also you can tune into Tulsa Time continuously. Bishop Conderla will still be doing Tulsa Time. As far as a permanent host, we don't know necessarily who would be a permanent host, but for the time being, Father Castle will actually be on here quite a bit with Bishop Conderla, some guests. We're going to be doing some different things, and so get excited for that. So stay tuned. So
yeah, absolutely.
So great. Well, thank you all for listening this week, and we hope you have a blessed rest of your week.
Thank you.